Hey everyone, forget the traditional family tree, because today's reality looks a whole lot more like a dynamic ecosystem. Let's dive right into this explainer and explore the fascinating shift from the traditional, intact nuclear family to the incredibly diverse family structures we see today. For the longest time, the traditional family system, the one based on lifetime marriage, well, that was considered the absolute default. But the reality of modern relationships is much richer, much more complex, and frankly, so much more dynamic. We're going to trace that exact evolution today.
Okay, right off the bat, we've got to dismantle a completely outdated and frankly negative label, the broken home. We hear that a lot when people talk about single-parent households, but it is so inaccurate. Now, even though no other family type has increased in number as rapidly, single-parent families are still totally misunderstood by society. So in this explainer, we are going to focus on the actual data, strip away the stigma, and see these family structures for what they really are.
Think about this number for a second, 95.5 million. What's so amazing about this figure is that it represents the massive shared community of adults in the U.S. who have at least one step-relative. Literally 95.5 million people. That's roughly 42% of the adult population. Chances are that includes you or definitely someone very close to you. We are looking at a shared social reality here, not some rare exception to the rule.
So, here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The pluralistic family. 2. Single-parent realities. 3. Navigating bi-nuclear families. 4. The remarriage equation. And 5. Inside the stepfamily. Let's jump into Section 1, the pluralistic family, defining the new normal. So what's the actual definition of this new normal? Well, sociology now uses the term pluralistic family system to accurately describe the everyday reality of modern relationships. We aren't just looking at the intact nuclear family anymore. This whole system consists of 3 major types of families: intact nuclear families, single-parent families, and step families. You'll often hear step families called blended families, where one or both partners have kids from a previous relationship. It's really like a journey, right? There's this brilliantly clear life pattern that a lot of married women experience today, moving through a sequence of very distinct family phases. They move from marriage to motherhood, which is often followed by divorce, then a period of single parenting, then remarriage, and eventually widowhood. While it definitely varies from person to person, it highlights a distinct pattern of serial monogamy interspersed with single parenting. It's an actively moving lifestyle, not just a static state. Moving right along to Section 2, single-parent realities, debunking the myths. Just look at this leap. Between 1970 and 2014, the percentage of children living in single-parent households literally doubled, jumping from 13% to nearly 28%. By 2014, we were talking about more than 20 million kids living with an unmarried parent. And these families are created in a few ways: through divorce, the death of a spouse, or births to unmarried mothers. And actually, globally speaking, births to unmarried mothers are increasing at a higher rate than single-parent families created by divorce. Now, the economic reality here is pretty stark. Single mothers face a poverty risk that is 4 times higher than married mothers. In fact, back in 2018, nearly 35% lived below the poverty line. So those negative consequences that people so often associate with single-parent families, they're actually heavily linked to this simple lack of economic resources and social capital rather than the family structure itself. But also, notice the contrast in how these households originate. While single-mother households often stem from non-marital births, over 60% of single-father families are created by divorce or separation. But hey, instead of just focusing on the deficits, we absolutely have to look at the incredibly empowering strength and parenting skills that single-parent families develop over time. Almost 2/3 of divorced single parents find that managing things actually gets easier. Custodial parents often become closer and a lot more responsive to their kids, which creates this wonderful, more egalitarian environment. They foster really strong family management, they emphasize open communication, and they experience profound personal growth.
Which brings us to Section 3, navigating bi-nuclear families, the co-parenting transition.
Okay, this brings us to a super crucial sociological concept, the bin-nuclear family. It gives us a solid framework for understanding post-divorce dynamics. It's actually considered one of the most complex and ambiguous relationships in contemporary America. Why? Because the family technically continues, but it's now stretched across 2 totally distinct households.
It's honestly like a giant puzzle. These subsystems show just how complex co-parenting really is. You've got former spouses who have to somehow separate their personal hostility from their mutual desire to raise their kids effectively. They've got to work through conflict over parenting styles and these constantly shifting roles. Then the parent-child subsystem has to make room for second parents when it comes to decision-making, and the siblings subsystem, oh boy, they're suddenly competing with step-siblings and half-siblings for affection, space, and probably the TV remote. It is a massive and sometimes chaotic reorganization of family boundaries.
Let's head into Section 4, the remarriage equation, demographics and realities.
No way, right? It might actually surprise you to learn that around 40% of current marriages involve one or both spouses remarrying. Now, the overall remarriage rate has declined a bit recently, partly because post-divorce cohabitation has become way more common, but remarriage still remains a huge part of the American family life cycle.
But here is where things get a bit unequal. There is a really stark contrast in remarriage probabilities when we factor in gender and resources. Basically, a lot more men remarry than women. Why is that? Well, divorced women tend to be older than never married women. They often bring fewer financial resources into a new marriage, and crucially, they are way more likely to have custody of the kids. The data shows that women are less likely to marry a man with children than men are to marry a woman with children. So having dependent children is a much stronger obstacle for women looking to remarry.
And finally, Section 5, inside the step family, blending and building.
We've got to recognize that step families, or blended families, operate under entirely different structural characteristics than a traditional first marriage family. Almost everyone in a step family is starting from a place of loss. They've all lost an important primary relationship. On top of that, one biological parent usually lives outside the current home, and the relationship between a parent and their biological child predates the new marriage completely. Because of all this baggage and history, step-parent roles are notoriously ill-defined right out of the gate.
Now, this blew my mind. Research shows it takes a staggering 7 years for a step family to move through its developmental timeline to fully resolve those earlier issues and establish genuine relationships. 7 years! It starts with early stages of fantasy and immersion, kind of a sink or swim phase where reality really hits. Then comes the middle stage of mobilization, where differences are actually recognized and the family starts to organize itself. Finally, in the later stages, intimate contact is made, roles become genuine, and real resolution is achieved. It takes a ton of time, patience, and effort.
And the challenges? They look totally different depending on if you're a stepmother or a stepfather. Women often answer with these huge, sometimes unrealistic expectations of instant love and creating a super close-knit family right away. But they find it incredibly stressful to take on that nurturing caretaker role that society unfairly demands of them. Men, on the other hand, well, they have fewer cruel step-parent myths to fight off. But they really struggle to squeeze into an already established family dynamic. They have to actively engage in what sociologists call paternal claiming, which means actively embracing stepchildren as biological ones, just to establish a sense of we-ness. Let's talk money, because that's always a major source of conflict, right? Step families usually tackle this by adopting either a one-pot or a two-pot financial solution. With the one-pot approach, everything is pooled together, so financially they act more like a traditional nuclear family. The two-pot solution, though, distributes resources strictly by biological relationship. That ensures specific funds go only to specific biological children. Managing all of this, right alongside discipline and divided loyalties, is absolutely key to moving through those developmental stages we just looked at.
But despite all these hurdles, step families absolutely fulfill traditional family functions. The benefits for kids can be incredible. Children gain additional role models, an extended kin network, and a step-parent who can act as a crucial objective sounding board. They also gain greater flexibility, sometimes new siblings, and very often a significantly improved economic situation compared to living in a single-parent household. So the structures are definitely changing, but that underlying purpose, connection, growth, support, that remains exactly the same. As you look at the pluralistic families all around you, maybe even your own, ask yourself, how do you redefine the modern family? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.